Welcome back to Radio Faces. I'm John McClain at HCC's Main Street Studios. He's Indy Kalu with his weekly Chalk Talk.
I received a tweet at Indy Kalu asking me, what do people mean when they say that Wade Phillips and the Houston Texans don't run the traditional or typical 3-4 defense? So first of all, let's exactly see what a 3-4 defense is. The reason you hear 3 come first, because you always designate the down lineman. So in a 3-4 defense, you have 3 down linemen, your 2 defensive ends, and your nose tackle, and you have 4 linebackers, your outside linebackers, and your 2 middle linebackers. When you hear 4-3 defense, then obviously you have 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers. I just want to get that out of the way before we started. And traditionally, and I'll speak in generalities, this is just very, very general and simplified. Traditionally, when you have a 3-4 system, you usually have your defensive lineman playing 2 gaps and holding the offensive lineman away from your linebackers. So in the traditional sense, like what you see with Pittsburgh or Baltimore, you'll have that big, strong, Haloti Ngata, Casey Hampton type of nose tackle who's responsible for both A gaps. These are considered the A gaps, and typically the nose tackle is responsible for making sure that no ball or nothing comes through those A gaps. And both of your defensive ends also play a 2-gap system, as you see that they're responsible for the B gap and the C gap on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So when you see that, you usually have bigger, stronger down linemen. They're not as athletic. They're not the pass rushers you see in the 4-3 system. But what they can do, they can take care of all the gap responsibilities with just 3 people. In Wade Phillips' system, in the Houston Texans defensive front, you will see a different kind of 3-4 system. And this is real exciting for the players, especially the underweight, more athletic players. Before each play, they will have a predetermined gap. So they don't have 2-gap responsibility. It depends on the huddle call. Yes, in the defensive huddle, we have calls also. But before each play, there's a predetermined responsibility for the 3 down linemen. So, for instance, in one play, you might have the nose tackle responsible for only 1 A gap. You could have the defensive end to your right responsible for a B gap. And you could have the defensive end on the left side responsible for the C gap. So then you could ask, well, what happens if the ball runs through any of these open gaps? That's where you have the stunts and you have your linebackers playing aggressively to the gap. Again, with predetermined gaps, you could play those gaps a little bit more aggressively. Then you could just fill those gaps and you don't have to read. And in this scenario right here, every gap is accounted for, and yet you still have 2 free linebackers. When you have a middle linebacker that doesn't have to account for a gap, then he can roam around and just get to the ball carrier, and you still have this weak side linebacker who is either rushing or doing the same thing as the middle linebacker, just roaming and getting to the ball. So that's the main difference when you talk about the traditional 3-4 defense compared to what Wade Phillips and the Houston Texans are running, is that they don't have to 2-gap. Most defensive linemen that want to get to the quarterback, they're athletic. They like to be able to just to hit a gap and be very athletic. And in the traditional 3-4, most of the guys, they'll hit their man and they'll be responsible for 2 different gaps. You will not see that many times, if at all, with the Houston Texans defense.
You had a lot of fun with that new toy, didn't you?
I like this new toy. I'm going to see if I can take it home.
That's impressive.